When my ex called me dead weight in front of his entire family at Thanksgiving, I felt something inside me break. He said it like a joke, like it was harmless, like I deserved it. Everyone was sitting around the table, plates full, glasses raised. His family was smiling just seconds before that word landed on me. Dead weight. I looked at him, waiting for him to take it back. He didn't. He leaned back in his chair like he was proud of himself. Some people laughed softly, some looked down at their plates. I stayed quiet, because I had learned that speaking up only made things worse. Then his father stood up. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't look angry, he just looked tired. And he said, "She deserves the truth." That was the moment I knew my ex was about to lose everything he had been lying about. Before I continue, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from, because stories like this need to be heard. My name is Elena Brooks. I was 29 years old at the time, and I had been in a relationship with Ryan Keller for almost 4 years. From the outside, Ryan looked successful. He talked big, he dressed well. He loved telling people about his plans, his future, his business ideas. His family believed he was building something important. What they didn't know was that behind closed doors, everything was falling apart. I had quit my job a year earlier to support him. That was his idea. He said if I focused on us, he could focus on his startup. He promised it would only be temporary. Temporary turned into months. I paid the rent. I bought the groceries. I covered his credit cards when they maxed out. I told myself this was what love looked like. Supporting your partner when things get hard. Ryan didn't see it that way. Slowly, his words changed. If I asked about money, I was negative. If I looked tired, I was lazy. If I talked about going back to work, he said I didn't believe in him enough. By the time Thanksgiving came around, I felt small all the time. I was careful with my words, careful with my tone, careful not to upset him in front of others. Thanksgiving dinner was at his parents' house in Ohio. A big table. Nice decorations. His mother Linda cared a lot about appearances. His father Thomas was quiet, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I remember standing in front of the mirror that afternoon, adjusting my sweater, telling myself to just get through the night. Smile. Be polite. Don't react. Ryan looked at me before we left and said, "Just don't make things awkward tonight." I didn't realize he was already planning to. Thanksgiving dinner started the way these things always do, with forced smiles and polite conversation that never quite feels natural. The table was full, the food was warm, and everyone was trying to act like everything was perfect. I sat between Ryan and his younger sister, keeping my hands folded in my lap, reminding myself to stay calm. I told myself this was just one night, and that I could get through it. At first, Ryan was in a good mood. He joked with his cousins, talked about football, and laughed louder than anyone else in the room. I noticed how relaxed he looked when everyone's attention was on him. He loved being admired. Every story he told made him sound smart, hardworking, and driven. I listened quietly, already used to the way he talked about his life as if I barely existed in it. Then, the conversation shifted to work. Someone asked Ryan how his business was going, and his whole face lit up. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and started talking about stress, responsibility, and pressure. He said building something from nothing wasn't easy. He said not everyone around him understood what it took to succeed. As he spoke, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. I knew where this was going. He always did this when he felt insecure. He would turn his frustration into a lesson, and I would become the example. Ryan shook his head and laughed, pretending to be humble. He said, "You know how it is. When you're carrying someone who isn't pulling their weight, everything slows down." He didn't look at me right away. He let the words sit in the air first. Then he turned toward me. "And honestly," he said, smiling, "dead weight is still weight." The table went quiet in a strange way. Not fully silent, but tense. I felt every pair of eyes move toward me. My face burned. My hands started shaking under the table, and I pressed my fingers together to stop them. I waited for someone to say something. I waited for him to laugh and say he was joking. He didn't. A soft laugh came from the other side of the table. It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. Someone cleared their throat. His mother smiled tightly and said, "Ryan, maybe that's not the best way to put it." He shrugged. "I'm just being honest." That word hit harder than the insult. Honest. Because it wasn't the truth. It was a lie dressed up as confidence, and everyone at the table seemed ready to accept it. Ryan kept going. "I've been supporting her for a long time now," he said. "At some point, you expect your partner to contribute, right?" He looked around the table like he was asking for agreement. A few people nodded. Someone said, "That's fair." I felt my stomach drop. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt tight. Years of being talked over had trained me to stay quiet. Inside my head, I was screaming. I thought about the rent checks I wrote, the groceries I paid for, the nights I stayed up worried about bills while he slept peacefully beside me. None of that mattered here. In that moment, he was the provider, and I was the burden. I looked down at my plate, pretending to adjust my fork. I could feel tears building, but I refused to let them fall. Crying would only prove his point. He would say I was too emotional, too sensitive, too weak. Ryan noticed my silence and smiled. "See, she knows I'm right." That was when something inside me shifted. Not anger, not sadness, something colder. I realized he wasn't just insulting me. He was rewriting our entire relationship in front of his family. And he was doing it confidently because he believed no one would challenge him. That was the real conflict. Not the words he used, but the lie he was telling and how easily everyone was letting him tell it. I wasn't just being embarrassed, I was being erased. And as I sat there, staring at my plate, I had no idea that someone else at the table had already decided they were done listening to Ryan's version of the story. After Ryan said, "She knows I'm right," the table fell into an uncomfortable quiet. No one knew where to look. Forks stopped moving. Glasses sat untouched. The room felt heavy, like the air itself had thickened. I kept my eyes down, not because I agreed with him, but because I knew if I looked up, my face would give me away. Ryan, on the other hand, looked completely at ease. He had said what he wanted to say, and now he was enjoying the control of it. He reached for his drink, took a slow sip, and leaned back in his chair. To him, the moment was over. He had won. I was still deciding what to do with myself. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk out. Another part of me wanted to finally say everything I had been holding in for years. But I also knew Ryan well enough to understand that if I spoke now, he would twist my words, cut me off, and make me look unstable. That had always been his way. So I stayed quiet, not because I was weak, but because I was thinking. I felt my heart beating fast, but my mind was clear. For the first time that night, I wasn't trying to protect him or smooth things over. I was listening. I was watching. I was done reacting on his terms. That was when I noticed his father. Thomas Keller had been sitting at the head of the table, silent through most of the dinner. He wasn't a loud man. He didn't interrupt. He didn't joke much either. He watched people closely, like he was always paying attention to what they weren't saying. While everyone else shifted in their seats, he stayed still. He reached for his napkin and placed it neatly beside his plate. Then, he folded his hands together and looked directly at Ryan. "Ryan," he said calmly, "that's enough." Ryan laughed under his breath. "What? I didn't say anything that isn't true." Thomas didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor cut through the room. Everyone looked at him. Even Ryan straightened a little, surprised. His father rarely stood up during dinner, and never without a reason. Thomas looked around the table before speaking again. "I've been listening to you talk all evening," he said, "and I need to correct something." Ryan rolled his eyes. "Dad, don't start." "I'm not starting," Thomas replied. I'm finishing. I felt a strange mix of fear and relief wash over me. I didn't know what he was about to say, but I could tell this wasn't about defending me out of politeness. This was something he had been holding in. Ryan crossed his arms. You always do this. You take her side. Thomas shook his head slowly. This has nothing to do with sides. He reached down and picked up an envelope from the sideboard behind him. It was thick and worn, like it had been handled many times. I noticed Ryan's face change the second he saw it. His jaw tightened. His smile disappeared. What is that? Ryan asked. Thomas didn't answer right away. He placed the envelope on the table in front of him, then looked at me for the first time that evening. His expression was serious, but kind. Not pity, respect. You don't have to say anything, he told me. I know you've been carrying more than your share. My chest tightened. No one had ever said that to me before. Not Ryan. Not his family. Not out loud. Ryan stood up halfway from his chair. This is not the time for this. It is exactly the time, Thomas said. I could feel everyone's attention shift fully now. This was no longer an awkward dinner moment. This was something else. Something real. Thomas turned back to Ryan. You've been telling this family a story, he said, and it's not the truth. Ryan's voice rose. You don't know what you're talking about. I know more than you think, Thomas replied. I've known for months. That was when it clicked for me. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This was planned. Ryan's mother spoke up softly. Thomas, please, let's not do this in front of everyone. Thomas didn't look at her. Everyone is already involved, he said. He made sure of that. I felt my hands relax in my lap. I wasn't shaking anymore. For the first time that night, I felt steady. Ryan looked at me then, really looked at me, and his expression changed. There was fear in his eyes. Not anger, fear. He finally understood that he had pushed too far. I realized something important in that moment. I didn't need to speak. I didn't need to defend myself. The truth was already standing up for me. And as Thomas placed his hand on the envelope, preparing to open it, I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. Thomas placed his hand flat on the envelope and looked straight at Ryan, not with anger, but with a calm that felt heavier than shouting ever could. The room was so quiet that I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. Ryan tried to laugh it off, but it came out wrong, forced and thin. He said, Dad, you're being dramatic. This is family dinner. Thomas didn't move his hand. He didn't blink. He said, No, Ryan, this is the moment you stop lying. That was when I felt the shift. Not just in the room, but inside myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was watching someone else take control. Thomas opened the envelope slowly and pulled out a stack of papers. He didn't rush. He wanted every second to count. He held up the first page and said, This is the termination letter from your company. Ryan stepped forward and snapped. That's private. Thomas didn't raise his voice. He said, You told everyone you took time off to rebuild. You were fired for misuse of funds. A quiet gasp came from the other end of the table. Ryan's mother put her hand over her mouth. Ryan shook his head and said, That's not how it happened. Thomas replied, It's exactly how it happened. I spoke to your supervisor myself. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had no answer. Thomas set the letter down and picked up another document. These are your credit card statements, he said. Maxed out? Every one of them. Ryan snapped. Why do you even have those? Thomas looked at him and said, Because you asked me to help you consolidate your debt. You begged me not to tell anyone. Ryan's face went pale. The confident man who had been joking minutes earlier was gone. In his place was someone cornered, exposed, and desperate. Then Thomas turned the papers slightly so everyone could see. These deposits, he said, pointing, came from Elena. My name sounded strange coming from his mouth, spoken with respect. Rent, utilities, groceries, loan payments. He looked around the table. For 11 months. The word hit the room like a weight. 11 months. Ryan laughed once, sharply, and said, "She wanted to help." Thomas looked back at him. "You told her you would collapse without her. You told her she was all you had." Ryan tried to interrupt, but Thomas held up his hand. "You don't get to talk right now." I felt my chest tighten, but it wasn't panic. It was something closer to release. All the nights I stayed quiet, all the times I doubted myself, were being laid out in black and white. Not by me, but by someone Ryan could not dismiss as emotional or dramatic. Thomas picked up the last document. "And this," he said, "is the repayment agreement you signed with Elena." Ryan's head snapped up. "That was informal." Thomas nodded. "Still binding. And you haven't paid a single dollar." He turned to the table. This woman was not dead weight. She was carrying him. Ryan finally exploded. He shouted that his father was betraying him. He said Elena manipulated everyone. He said stress made him say things he didn't mean. His voice got louder and louder, each word digging him deeper. He sounded exactly like he always did when he lost control. Defensive. Blaming. Loud. That was when I stood up. The sound of my chair moving caught everyone's attention. I didn't rush. I didn't shake. I felt calm in a way I never had before. I looked at Ryan and said, "I never asked you for credit. I just didn't expect you to lie about me." My voice was steady. That surprised even me. "You called me dead weight because you thought no one would ever check the truth." Ryan turned to me, his eyes wide, and said, "You're doing this on purpose." I looked at him and said, "No. You did this the moment you said my name." Then I reached into my pocket and placed my phone on the table. I unlocked it and pressed play. Ryan's voice filled the room. Tired, quiet, desperate. He said, "Just cover this one more month. I swear I'll fix everything. If my family finds out, I'm done." I stopped the recording. No one spoke. Even Ryan didn't try. His own words had finished the job. Thomas nodded slowly. "That," he said, "is the truth." Ryan's mother started crying. Not loudly, but the kind of crying that comes from realizing you've believed the wrong story for too long. She looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry." I nodded, not because it fixed anything, but because it was enough for that moment. Ryan looked around the table, searching for someone to defend him. No one did. Thomas turned to Ryan and said the words that mattered most. "You will not speak to her like that again. You will not take her money, and you will not pretend to be something you are not." He paused. "You embarrassed yourself tonight." That was the real revenge. Not shouting, not insults, not drama. It was exposure. It was the collapse of the story Ryan built to feel powerful. It was watching the room finally see him the way I had for years. I picked up my coat. I didn't rush. I didn't argue. I didn't look back at Ryan. I thanked Thomas quietly. He nodded, like he understood more than words could explain. As I walked out of that house, the cold air hit my face, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. Behind me, Ryan was still trying to explain himself, still talking, still scrambling. But his words no longer mattered. The truth had already spoken, and it had spoken loudly enough for everyone to hear. I didn't cry when I walked out of that house. I thought I would, but I didn't. The cold air hit my face, sharp and real, and it felt like waking up after a long, heavy sleep. For the first time in years, I wasn't replaying an argument in my head or wondering what I could have said differently. There was nothing left to explain. The truth had already been said out loud, and it didn't belong to me anymore. Ryan didn't follow me outside. That alone told me everything. If this had happened any other time, he would have chased after me, lowered his voice, and told me I was ruining things. He would have asked me to fix it. But that night, there was nothing left for me to fix. His story had collapsed in front of the people whose approval he needed most. I drove home in silence. No music. No phone calls. Just the sound of the road and my own breathing. Every few minutes, I expected my phone to buzz with a message from him, angry or apologetic, but it didn't. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a moment and realized something important. I felt lighter. Not happy. Not relieved. Just lighter. Like I had finally set something down that I had been carrying for far too long. The next morning, I woke up early without an alarm. That almost never happened when I was with Ryan. My body was used to tension, used to late nights worrying about money and mornings walking on eggshells. But that day, the quiet felt different. It wasn't empty. It was calm. I made coffee and sat by the window, thinking about everything that had led up to that dinner. All the excuses I had made for him. All the times I had told myself it would get better if I just tried harder. I didn't hear from Ryan until that afternoon. When his name finally appeared on my phone, I didn't feel fear or guilt. I felt distance. His message wasn't an apology. It was long and defensive. He said his father had overreacted. He said I should have stopped him before things got out of hand. He said family matters should stay private. He never once said he was sorry for calling me dead weight. That was the moment I blocked him. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I understood then that if I left the door open, even a little, he would keep trying to rewrite what happened. Blocking him wasn't revenge, it was self-respect. Over the next few days, messages came in from unexpected places. His sister reached out first. She said she had never known the truth and thanked me for staying calm that night. His mother sent a short message apologizing for not seeing it sooner. I didn't respond right away. I didn't feel the need to rush. For once, I was moving at my own pace. Thomas was the last to contact me. He didn't write much. He simply said he was sorry for what I had gone through and that I deserved better. That message meant more to me than he probably realized. Not because I needed his approval, but because it confirmed what I had already started to believe about myself. In the weeks that followed, I started rebuilding my life in small, quiet ways. I updated my resume. I reached out to old friends I had drifted away from. I took a job that didn't come with big promises or dramatic speeches, just stability. For the first time in a long time, my money was my own, my time was my own, my peace was my own. I also started noticing how much of myself I had lost while trying to support someone who never planned to stand on his own. I had stopped trusting my instincts. I had stopped believing my effort mattered. Slowly, that came back. Not all at once, but enough to remind me who I was before I learned to make myself smaller. As for Ryan, I heard things through other people. His business never recovered. His family stopped covering for him. The image he had built so carefully cracked, and once it cracked, it never fully came back together. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't need to. Knowing the truth was out there was enough. That was the real revenge. Not watching him suffer, but knowing I no longer carried the blame for his failures. Knowing that the same people who once looked at me with doubt now saw me with clarity. Knowing that I walked away without screaming, without begging, without losing myself. If someone watching this feels like they are being slowly rewritten into someone smaller, I want you to know this. You are not too sensitive. You are not dead weight, and you are not wrong for wanting respect. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel so more voices like this can be heard. Comment below and tell me which city you are watching from. And if you have lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. You never know who needs to read it today. He called me dead weight, but the truth set me free.